So, just to give a quick introduction out the way, Eric, want to introduce yourself? Tell everybody what you've been up to, who you are, what you've been through.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Where do we go from there? I'm excited just to get chatting. So yeah, I'll start real high level. I'm based in Brooklyn. I grew up in New York. I am a full-time personal holistic development coach. So I work with all sorts of people through all sorts of things. My background's in psychology and sociology. We're leaving out a lot of cool details there on like how I ended up here, but I've held like probably 24 jobs. I've been a touring musician for like 15 years. I love to nerd out, which is really how I discovered your podcast. And I don't know, maybe that's a good high level thing to just kick off with. And I'm just looking forward to getting to know you and chatting about, I don't know, whatever we get to chatting about.
Sweet. I respect that. So while I'm based in Florida, I actually grew up in, I was born in the Bronx.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So I lived in the Bronx for I want to say a couple of years, but I ended up like traveling around and moving different places. But
that's sick.
I want to say like every once in a while, I do end up going back to New York just to like visit family and friends.
Nice, man. Yeah. It's one of those places that I think always, you're always kind of tethered to it. Like no matter what you try to do, like there's always some New York in you. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Without a doubt, especially when it comes to like certain words.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try my best, to just speak like, with good grammar, not perfect pronunciation, but there's always like one or two words that it will slip out and somebody will pick up and like, hey, you're from New York, right? And it's always just like the simplest words like, coffee, water, and stuff like
totally.
that.
Yeah. Especially from the Bronx, man. That's a whole other subculture of language.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, from the time that I remember, like the Bronx was just like a big melting pot of a bunch of different cultures.
Oh yeah,
dude.
Yeah, it's great.
So, what are some of the stuff that you like to nerd out about?
Oh man, so much. I mean, especially as I was like going through like past podcast episodes of yours, and at first, if I'm being honest, at first I was like, shit, I don't know what to bring to the table here because a lot of this is like, I saw a lot of content around like D&D,
yeah,
and which I like, and like I don't think I saw Magic, but that's like I immediately connected Magic to it, and I was like, man, I played Magic like years ago, but I'm way out of it. And I have friends that are still real active, and I'm like looking at some of the video game, like some Halo references and some other stuff there, and I'm like, damn, I'm not really like a gamer. But what I do love is, and something, it's like a vibe that you bring to this show, I think, is like, and it's in your tagline, like allowing the tangents to exist. And I think that's something that I nerd out on. Like as a coach, conversation is central. And so like, hitting people with the right questions and seeing where that brings them is like a beautiful thing. And I think I'll try to put a bow on this with like the nerdy stuff that I love. Like I'm inspired by like a lot of classic psychologists, and like I said, I went to school for psychology, but that wasn't really what I went to school for. I first went for music industry, and then I was like, screw this. I already learned how to book shows. Like, I don't want to do this again. This feels like just a furthering of like what I was doing kind of in high school, but with way more money involved. And I was like, then I switched my major temporarily to astronomy. And
okay.
Yeah. And so like, I think maybe that kind of like gives you some context. Like I love to talk, I find it almost impossible to separate, self-development, self-actualization, from sort of like the universal. And like, often, especially if I'm going on like just like rants with friends, and it can happen inside client sessions too, but like we'll talk about just how quantum mechanics and spiral dynamics kind of like play into this whole thing of like wanting to improve ourselves. And that's where I love to nerd, man. And I think it's also interesting, like having a background in music and and being a personal trainer for like 15 years and being so like also embedded in like health and wellness, there's also this interesting play of like, I don't know, just like cause and effect, at the same time, like, I don't know. I'm rambling here, but that's where we're going.
Yeah, dude, that's perfect. This is what the whole podcast is actually about. You know, just whatever's on your mind. I know you said you were like a traveling musician for about 20 years.
Yeah, close to.
What were some of the bands that actually inspired you? Because like while I'm not super like musically talented, I guess you can say, but I love music to basically almost every genre that I've listened to.
Hell yeah.
What were some of the bands that like actually inspired you to like go on the road, tour, and be in the DIY scene?
That's a good question, and also a good pickup on the DIY part. Like, and I want to hear. I'll share mine, but I want to hear what you're coming to the table with too, because I think that's a cool place to kind of like jive. Like, all right. I think the first. This is funny. I think the first cassette I ever purchased, because, you know, cassettes were like, that was the thing, was Michael Jackson, which is interesting because I spent most of my touring and like, you know, my band career in anything but what you would consider like the pop world. But like pop is kind of central, I think, for me because of that. It was like my first exposure, like growing up. You know, my dad was like real into the Beach Boys, and we did a lot of stuff like Chicago, and like some of like the more like, let's say like radio friendly pop. Mm-hmm. But then like same time I'm getting, you know, Evil Empire by Rage, and I'm getting like I picked up a copy of Pearl Jam's 10 when nice. When I was like, I don't know, I was super young. And so it's weird. Like there's this kind of mishmash. And at the same time also, like growing up, especially because my dad was like, my mom and dad met because they would go like dancing at clubs. Okay. And like clubs in the era when they went, you know, like it wasn't EDM. It was like live bands playing like a lot of like pop, but like a lot of stuff based in like jazz and sort of like maybe even like big band and some like doo-wop. And so it had like a little more soul to it, I think too. So I don't know, those, like a lot of that stuff really influenced me. And then I can go into specifics of the artists and stuff, but like, I think that's maybe a good place to start. What about you? Like what was the first music you remember listening to, and what kind of like, how did that shape what you listen to now?
Oh man, that's a good question. I know I've talked about this like in, with some of my old friends too. Like growing up, some of the songs that I used to listen to was just a lot of like Spanish music, like cultural, you know, bachata, merengue. And I would listen to that for so much when I was younger that I ended up like disliking music for a while. Okay. And it wasn't until my father started introducing me to different types of genres. So like into rap and hip hop and then rock. Was listening to like Eminem and Jay-Z back in the day, and then when he introduced me to rock, it was actually Black Sabbath. And,
nice.
Operation Ivy, but
wow.
Rancid, yeah, just going into like a lot more of the punk scene, and then it really like started hitting me when he gave me the CD of Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory.
Yes,
and
dude.
That I immediately fell in love with like rock after that. And then a little bit later, one of my cousins ended up getting sponsored for skateboarding. So he was into like the whole punk scene. He introduced me to some more bands, the Offsprings, Blink-182, and I just started liking more punk than anything else, and got into like ska bands, and it's just a whole like, you know, snowball effect from there.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's great. We can. I mean, that's it. That's the DIY punk world is what I've like played music in for almost the whole Yeah, the whole time. I've done some offshoot stuff. I played, actually my bass player that I'm still in, the band that I'm still in now is called Timeshares, and we've been a band for like fucking like 11 years. Sweet. Which is crazy. And so my bass player and I, during some like downtime, we would like do some side project stuff. So we were in like a hip hop band for a while, and we played with like Immortal Technique.
Nice.
And it was crazy. We played some crazy shit. It was really nuts. And we did more of like the, I don't even know what you call it now. Like the sort of like second wave pop punk thing where it was,
like around like New Found Glory or something like that.
Yeah, even like maybe a smidge after that. Like I'm thinking of bands like Set Your Goals and like what else is kind of in that world that I'm thinking about. It's been a minute since I've done that, since I've hung in that spot. But like we did like a side project like that, and but like punk has always been. I mean, you said Op Ivy, and I was like, oh yeah, all right, like totally. That was. It's interesting. I like have spent so much of my time playing music in the punk world, but I think what really got me into like DIY punk was actually like the DIY scene when I was growing up, at least just hyper locally, was way more about like screamo and sort of like that like maybe garage band, garage punk stuff.
Gotcha.
But then it got a little more polished, and I was like bringing back in the pop roots, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, let's do some harmonies and stuff. We don't have to just be
just
so
like
it's funny
all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be so heavy all the time.
Nah, I could definitely relate to that. Like I tried to start a band for a while, and it just ended up just me trying to like do a lot of things. It's basically how I ended up learning how to just record audio and do a little bit of editing.
Oh, cool.
But I ended up taking like vocal lessons for like a year and trying to learn how to play guitar, because I was going to be the screaming person and play rhythm guitar and everything. And like for a while, I felt like it was starting to go somewhere, but then I realized nobody else was putting as much effort into it as I was. And that's just because of like where we were at in life. And so we all had just, priorities to take care of first before we got into that. So kind of,
makes sense.
Yeah, we kind of stopped doing that. But overall, like I took a lot of like influences, because over the years I started getting into like heavier and heavier music, and that's just because of like the state of mind that I was in, where some of like the harmonies like of like rap and some of like I guess not softer rock, but kind of like the the dad rocks like Foo Fighters and everything. It just wasn't like hitting enough, or like I wasn't able to relate to how I felt at the time. So I just started getting into like heavier and heavier stuff, like Suicide Silence, Chelsea Grin, and just like more brutal stuff. And
I can get down to that too. I mean, did plenty of Dillinger Escape Plan. Plenty of, all right, we can.
Dillinger Escape Plan, Soulfly, Mastodon, and even their supergroup. What was it? Damn, I forgot the name of the supergroup. That it was the bass player from Mastodon, drummer from somewhere else, singer from Dillinger Escape Plan, and the dude
I don't know. Damn, that sounds like crazy. What?
Killer Be Killed. There we go.
Damn.
Yeah, the band was called Killer Be Killed because one of the songs was Wings of Feather and Wax.
Okay.
And so my band was gonna be called like Wings of Icarus, just because like I was just like on a whole like Icarus like wings and style like aesthetic I wanted to go with. But
that's sick. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Dude, they're really really good. I think they only put out like one EP or something, but it's definitely worth checking out. What was the most memorable, like, I guess, event or show that you've ever played?
Oh, that's a good one. There's so many that are memorable for different reasons. Like, dude, Well, because there's been some crazy, I mean, you know, self doing everything, self booking, driving, like especially there were plenty of years where we didn't have a trailer of any kind. We didn't have a 15 passenger van. We did a minivan where we took out the seats and we like slept on top of the amps. Like it was crazy. And we did that for quite a while. And you know, that basically, I think the whole ethos, and I think a lot of it's probably inspired by, you know, the Discord, like DC punk band scene of just like, yo, just get out there and just do it. And, you know, E. McKay and stuff and like Fugazi, a lot of that really pushed this band to just do what it could do with the resources it had. And so I think part of that was like, hey, take whatever show you can get on. And so like I remember early tours with the band we were in prior to this band, because everyone in this band kind of like came out of another band we were in that dissolved, which is fascinating. And then I remember like an early tour where like half the shows fell through, and we posted up with like this person we just met in Atlanta and just started booking the rest of the tour through MySpace. And it was like MySpace show searching. Yeah. And like, I remember showing up to this show that we got on with this person who had like I can't even remember his name. It was Terigian, I think was his name. Fascinating name. I was like, it was at a book like Info Shop when like info shops were hot, and that was like the place to host like alternative DIY stuff. And we show up and this guy like immediately brings us up through like the shop, and it's just a squat, and and like brings us up to the roof, and he's like walking on this 1.5 foot wide like basically like a balance beam that was the perimeter of the roof, and there's people out there that like they're burning like pallets, and it was fucking crazy. And he's just like tightrope walking the edge. He's like, welcome, like we're stoked for the show. And I looked at like my buddy Mike. I was like, dude, what the hell? What are we getting into right here? So like crazy stuff like that sticks out, and then also like the cool like, oh wow, we did this, like kind of highlights. Like we played like a summer stage show at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park with the Bouncing Souls and Lucero. Nice. And yeah, and like that was an awesome experience. We did a couple tours in Europe, and we played this like monster festival in where was it, in Belgium, and like we were the first set of the day, and like I remember like, and I felt like shit. I'm like pounding like European Robitussin, some weird stuff, and I'm like crushing alcohol just to get my head right enough so I could like get through the set. And I remember looking out and be like, there's 2,500 people in this outdoor tent. It was massive. And I was like, how the hell did we do this? Like a bunch of guys that like wrote these songs and practiced them in my bass player's mom's basement. Like that's surreal. And to see people singing words back, that sticks out for sure.
Yeah. I can only imagine like how I guess like intense that energy is, like just seeing this massive crowd just be able to sing the lyrics to your song is
crazy.
Yeah, it's something that I wish I could experience, but I know that's just a lot of hard work, and you've like put in the work and you put in the effort, and that's crazy that I'm actually able to talk to someone that's gone through that experience.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. That sounds, I mean, the only like little caveat or disclaimer or whatever I would throw on that is like, it's funny. It's just a bunch. Yeah, it's hard work, and when you look at it, it seems like a mountain, but it's also like it's made up of all those like terrible decisions and like, you know, like little tiny steps forward, and also like we're not even. I'm like, I have friends in bands that just dwarf anything we've ever done, and that I'm like, I look at them and I'm like, damn, like what, like that's crazy. Anyway, all
right. So let me ask you this. If you could form a super band of any artist from any genre ever, who would you pick to be in this band?
Dude, that is a crazy question. I like this. Oh man, and I'm in the band.
You're in the band. You can do
I'm in the band.
Any like position you want.
Oh man, that's crazy. That's like, I feel like I immediately go to like the people that I want to be in the band, and then I'm like, I'm not good enough to be in that band with them. Oh man. I mean, I think the first person that comes to my mind is like David Bazan, Pedro the Lion. Like I would love to, because I just love the way he approaches songwriting, especially because he plays the bass and he sings everything. It's just fascinating how he arranges stuff. Also like big pop sensibility. I think that's like, and still contemporary. So that's like pretty cool. Let's see, who else comes to my mind right now is like, I mean, dude, I would love to have Bonham sit behind the kit. That would be nuts. This is a good one. I think Patterson Hood from Drive By Truckers would be really sick, because I also like the way he writes on guitar and like plays rhythm and his phrasing. That would be sick. Oh man, this is so tough. I don't even know what I'm doing. I think at this point I'm probably just shaking a fucking tambourine. I don't know, like I think that's all. And I have like this super group behind me. Oh yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it there for now. Maybe I'll come back to it. There might be more.
Hey, man, if I were, I definitely want to be able to play in like a super band like that. I'll just like play the Electric Triangle or something.
Yeah.
But like in terms of members, I want to go with like something like weird and like different like sound. So I think for like a vocalist, I would have to choose somebody like Ozzy Osbourne. Just because like he can still like do a lot of the same notes that he can't from back in the day, and he just has that unique sound in his voice. And having someone like on the drums like Joey Jordison.
Oh yeah, rest in peace, man. Just passed away.
Yeah, not too long ago, and he was an amazing drummer too.
Oh yeah.
So having someone like him behind the kit, and just thinking like someone that is I don't know if you're familiar with the band Dance Gavin Dance.
Yeah, I mean enough that I know the name. I've heard like a handful of tracks. Like I don't think I could pick out too much isolated, but I got you.
Yeah, so like the guitarist Will Swan.
Okay.
He's very like math rock in terms of the way he plays guitar, but it's very technical, and I feel that if he has like somebody like Ozzy Osbourne like singing, he can do something heavy but technical and make it sound like very what's the word that I'm looking for? It's I want to say phonetical, but I feel like that's very wrong. But just like a very unique sound that's like both dark and upbeat at the same time.
When I think about like some of the guitar work from Dance Gavin Dance, I think about like some of the earlier stuff from like Blood Brothers.
Oh, okay.
And what's that? There was like a 3-piece band from the West Coast. That was just like totally. It was like kind of chaotic, mathy, really fast, really aggressive, but also kind of anthemic. Like there's like this like thing to it. I can't place the name right now, but yeah, I get where you're going with this.
Yeah, so just having like a very like dark but very, like little upbeat technical like sound to it. I think that would be pretty interesting.
Yes.
And just having somebody like on the bass, like I don't know, the bass would be definitely tricky, because I would like the bass to pop out, because I don't know about you, but I feel like in terms of a lot of songs nowadays, in terms of bands, the bass player doesn't get like enough attention or enough recognition as they should. And having a good like bass player and just doing what they do best, it really makes the song pop out a lot more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, kind of. Sometimes it becomes like there's a tendency, I think, to make like the production of a lot of semi-recent stuff makes the bass kind of become this saturated like blanket, right? Which is cool, right? Because it's like you feel it everywhere, and you kind of like sit in it, and like that low end is, but there's less articulation and there's less like musicality to it. So I hear, you like want it to pop.
It's tricky. So I would have to like think about the bass player as well. But overall, that actually reminds me, like the very first show that I actually went to was a basement show in New York. That one of my cousins took me to. One of her friends was playing in a local band called A Man A Wave. Okay. I believe the show was taking place in Manhattan, like underneath, like in the basement of a bar or whatever.
Sick.
It was like the most like unique experience that I've ever had, because I've never been to like a actual concert until that point, and just having that, I guess that atmosphere of watching the band right in front of you and just everybody just moshing, going crazy and everything. It was so like unique, and I was taken back at first. And I didn't get into the pit at that time because this was brand new to me. I love the music, but just like the overall atmosphere, I did not know any of the rules of being in a mosh pit. I just saw fists flying and everything, and I was like, this is great, but I don't know what to do. So it took a while before I was actually able to go to another show. And the first time that I got into a mosh pit was during a band that, it was actually during Warped Tour. I went to go see a band called Crossfaith. They were from Japan. Okay. And it was a relatively small crowd, but they were able to get the entire crowd moving. Sick. And that was the very first time I jumped in a mosh pit, and I had like the time of my life. What was like your first time jumping into a pit, or like being inside of a crowd like that? Yeah, I mean, as you were talking about it, I was thinking like very similar first exposure. The DIY sort of like, let's just call it the alternative scene. It was mostly punk, but like screamo, and there was like a lot of heavy. There was like some kind of tough guy sort of hardcore was kind of big on Long Island. It still is. I mean, bands like Incendiary, like big hardcore bands, and like This Is Hell, like other bands that came out of Long Island. You know, all sorts of different angles of genres and stuff, mm-hmm. but the underlying sort of foundation was we're going to put on a show that's almost intentionally not at a club. Like it's not at a venue. And that allows for just like total freedom of expression. And like, we're going to do what we want to do. And, you know, there's no overhead, so it's way cheaper. Or, you know, that's why growing up, like a lot of shows I went to were like VFW halls and basements and churches and like places that you could rent out for like nothing. And so like I'm thinking there's two places in particular that are coming up in my mind. I don't remember which one was first. I don't remember my first show. I remember the first show I played. It was a backyard like barbecue party. Nice. Like, it was crazy. But like there was a warehouse venue, like literally in a town on Long Island that had zero residential, like nothing. It was just warehouse, and it was this pretty sketchy guy that like would occasionally bounce from warehouse to warehouse when he got kicked out, mm-hmm. like because they found out what he was doing. He also was up to some sketchy shit. Like I think he was involved in some weird sexual harassment stuff like years later. Could be like conflating that. Like there might be somebody else that was like alongside that, but regardless, there was a venue, called the Local 7, and it was like literally bare bones, had a PA system, concrete floors, like
kind of like shitty propped up risers. I think it was like $5 to get in for the show. I think that's what was happening. It wasn't sexual harassment. The guy was just basically, he was not paying anybody, really. Essentially. Okay. He was collecting all this money and saying it was for overhead and whatever else. I think that was the deal. Anyway, I was like a kid, and I was like going to these shows and watching people, just like swinging fists, and there was no, there's no like security guard. There's no like venue personnel. It was like a free for all. And I loved that. Yeah. I was like, damn, this is so cool. This is so like freeing. And, I didn't know what the word cathartic meant, but like that, like now I know like it was cathartic. I was like exploring and releasing, so I know what you're talking about. Definitely like the underground vibe.
Yes. And like one of the sorry, I can't speak. One of the things that like ran through my mind at that time, during that basement show, like everything felt almost like tribalistic, but it felt great.
Yeah,
I wanted to jump in, but I did not know what I should be doing. But it was so cool because it was very like primal. It was very tribalistic, but there was clearly like an order to the chaos.
Yeah,
and I love that. And going to like even a bigger show after that, I've seen people get knocked down, and immediately everybody stops and then picks those people back up, and they continue with the chaos. It was a really big sense of camaraderie that I love too. That I have not been able to find that like in any other like show or event that I've gone to.
First off, two things that you just said I think are we're like hyper aligned on this. And like the last thing you said is community. It was like this, like I had played team sports and stuff. I played soccer forever. I played like little league ball, played baseball. Like, so I was exposed to what it was like to be inside a community. And I was a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout actually, which is crazy. I just love to camp, man, and tie knots. That was it. But, but like, so I had been exposed to ideas of community, but there was something about it that like bonded you in the primalness. Yes. It was like, show up and be who you are. And just like, and like kind of, maybe sometimes you got to fight for it. You got to like figure out how to fit in here, but there's simultaneously this like sense of like welcoming, and you're like navigating that, and building this idea of community where everyone's like, yeah, we're all just here to experience this part of life together. And you said that sparked, that was like pretty cool to think about this, like, common community aspect. But the other thing you said too, and this is funny, that maybe this is an interesting segue into like talking about some other stuff like around like personality development and life experiences and all the quantum shit I was babbling about before. But like you said there was an order to the chaos, and man, that is such a powerful truth. And I think some of the best psychological contributors that I'm aware of talk often about how the people that live on the edge of order, like one foot into chaos, they're artists, they're musicians, they're visual artists, they're you name it. Any form of like that sort of artistic expression is like where you're like pulling the chaos into, orderly, quote unquote, society. And that's where we get like a lot of our new forms of culture and ways of being and all this shit. And I just love the way you said that. Like, you're like watching this thing that is simultaneously both like insane, like dudes broken noses and right. And like someone like, loses a shoe because they stage dive, and like someone hits someone with that shoe, and there's like this seemingly like it's just chaotic, but there's also this weird understood order to it.
Yes,
and that is like a fascinating like dance.
Yeah, it's definitely true what you say of a lot of people that have just one foot into like the I want to say realm, or like the world of chaos, are those that have been tremendous artists, like you mentioned, like either visual arts or musicians, literature. There's been some amazing people throughout time that have been able to just grasp that and bring it into the normal realm of society. And that leads me into like what I just thought about, like how a lot of schools have been cutting like a lot of graphic art art programs, music, and it's sad because I feel that helps a lot of people like learn about who they are, what they like. Especially like someone like me, where growing up I didn't have like an identity. I felt like I didn't really belong anywhere. In terms of like different groups of people, I always liked a little bit of everything, and I've always called myself like the jack of all trades, just because I would have like a foot in each little thing, but I never had like that true sense of like, I belong here. And it wasn't until I learned about, learned a little bit of drawing. I wasn't that good, but got into dancing and just learning how to express myself through movements and just simple things. And in terms of like, hip hop, learning how to write better and getting more into music itself and going into shows. And once I'm actually at a show, I always get that feeling of like, this is where I belong. Like, I don't have to fake being someone else, because like, I don't have to fake being someone else. I don't have to worry about how I look. Because I've always had like struggle with like my self-image. Whenever I go to a show, is like I'm comfortable with who I am. Like, nobody's going to judge me here. And if something happens, these people understand like where I'm coming from too. So
that's amazing.
I've always like met people either at the side of the pit, and it'll just be like one look and we just like instantly know what we're thinking. And it'll just be like a hug or like, giving each other a handshake. I remember one time, I forgot what band was playing, and all I seen was this dude just run up behind me, and he just gave me a look, and I just nodded, and I just instantly like picked him up because he wanted to crowd surf.
Yeah,
it's like a very weird thing where everybody's just in sync, and I love it.
That's so, yeah. Oh man, you just touched on so many interesting things there. Like, like the sort of unspoken connectivity that exists when you're in an environment like that. Maybe like the socio-political side of like, why, like when the dollar dictates everything, you start chopping programs in schools that, like, let's face it, like you can sit and talk about what makes a productive member of society, and right, like, we got to be honest, like, that school is like about producing certain things from people, and it is funded, and it is about dollars, but sadly, like, I think the more you cut programs like that because of the short-term dollar stuff and whatever, public school. I mean, I could probably rant about education system stuff, but like, you start to miss out on assisting people in becoming more like fully actualized humans. Like, yes. Right. If we only train the logic and reason of our brain and like regurgitating like information from a book and stuff, and we don't focus on the other side of the brain that is about expression and creativity and free form thought and like all of this amazing stuff, like we if we're being honest here, like, we're not producing the most productive people. Like, you need both of those things, right? You need that dualism, and going back to like your chaos order thing, like, yes. You need both sides of that to be developed and encouraged. And it's sad that a lot of those things are getting pushed to the side so that we can, have people that, I don't know, the education system is interesting too, because it's like we're still sort of like, formal education was built around the age of industrialization, and it was like, how do we make great factory workers? And right, and it's like, hey, we're not there anymore. Like, that's not quite the goal or the needs of society. We need people that think outside the box, not just know how to live in the box.
Definitely agree 100%, especially with because I also work in the tech field, and tech is just constantly evolving. And one of my I guess one of my fears, even growing up, was just being this robotic person, just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's why I always struggled with planning things out for my future, and it just gave me so much stress and anxiety. And it wasn't until later on in life where I had to learn to just take things one day at a time, and just kind of just go with the flow and learn about balance, and just taking the good with the bad and vice versa. And that's kind of what I try to portray onto my younger brother and sisters too. Just to be able to, it's okay to be logical, but also, learn to be creative. Just because there will be situations where sometimes being logical is not super helpful. You just got to be creative. You got to think about think about something in a different way or in a different light. And that can even translate into, people relationships. Sometimes you just got to think about a certain situation from their perspective, or think about it from an outside perspective. Because if you just get stuck within your own mind or your own way of thinking, it's going to be tough, and you may not be able to advance further on.
Yeah, I love where you're going. You're really stepping into the pool that I'm swimming in every day with clients and stuff. And just what's really shaped me. I hear you saying these things about balance and right, taking the good with the bad. Yeah, I think that no matter what your interests are, no matter what your field is of work, no matter what your goals are in life, I think everything can only be made better when you accept, when you accept both sides of every coin, right? Yes. Good, bad, excitement, sadness, elation, depression. Depression is obviously a much bigger term, and I think that carries a lot with it. But conscious and unconscious, left, right, especially in today when we're looking everything's, especially when you look through the lens of social media in the last maybe 2 years, the level of polarization is honestly alarming. It's heightened. Everybody is you're either on that team or this team. Yeah. And right. And just to bring back in some of the shit that the theme here is about nerding out. So some of the stuff I nerd on is development of the human psyche, and go back to the master Carl Jung again and say the goal is to create is to have someone embrace the unconscious into their conscious ego, into learning how to balance opposing forces, opposing tensions, how to integrate them all and not become top-sided, or one is heavy over the other. And there are moments that you said we're sitting in balance all the time. It's think about a seesaw. You got two people in total balance. Nothing ever happens. So it's a fluctuation of using the balance. Today, maybe I need to be a little more aggressive. Tomorrow, maybe I need to be a little more withdrawn, so that I can get where I'm going and utilize all of that. And anyway, I don't know. That's totally a rant. I don't know if that opens the right can of worms or not, but
I agree with you 100% too. And a lot of the stuff that because I love psychology also. I didn't fully study into it, but I've always liked learning bits and pieces, and even talking to other people that are more knowledgeable than me in that, just because I love to learn and hear things from other people's perspective. But a lot of the stuff that I think about and know have been from just like my own personal experiences from dealing with depression and just kind of learning about myself. And I'll admit, it literally took me like over 10 plus years just to be able to get to the state of mind that I'm at now. Where I'm not stuck only in like the sad like part of my mind. I can get out and just be able to function as normally as I would, and not just be stuck constantly. And a lot of it does come down to just learning who you are and learning, your own emotions and just being comfortable with that, because I know there will be days where I'll probably fall like into like a sadder state of mind, but learning there's different ways I can cope with that and be able to move forward. And some days I'll be more, aggressive or upbeat and everything, and just be able to learn how to balance myself out and knowing how my emotions have an effect on other people, because that is something that took a long time to learn, because I was just not aware of like how I was affecting others too.
Dude, first off, I think that deserves a lot of acknowledgement and appreciation, because to bring yourself to this, like you said, it took 10 years to kind of get where you're at now, and that's not something to take lightly. Like, that's amazing. A lot of people, dude, 100%. A lot of people, I think, especially clients, and just talking to people all the time about like, what's your experience of life like? Like, I don't know if there's anything more important really than like, how satisfied are you? How meaningful is your life? I think those things are really important no matter who you are. And what you said, I think, is so powerful, is like getting to know myself better, learning more about myself. And I think I would, if I could add one thing there, it would be accepting that, like, right? Because we can learn stuff that we go like, nope, not taking that in. Yeah. And right. And like, I think part of really living a life that is satisfying, meaningful, rich, it's about embracing all of the good and all of the shit. And because once you embrace it, like you open the dark closet and you check out actually what's in there, then you're like, oh, cool. All right. At least I know what's in there now. Yeah. And now I can move forward. Because there's less mystery. I'm like, oh, okay, I tend to do XYZ that sucks and I don't like it and I don't love being in that place. How can I use that? Like, how can I, now that I'm aware of it, what can I do about it?
Yes, definitely. And like, I'll even admit, once like you said, like acceptance is a really big thing, but it's also, I feel like it's the hardest to accomplish. Yes. It's like, just to put like my own perspective into things, like I used to hate how I look. I used to just be, very negative about myself. And it was super hard just to be able to accept the way that I am and the way that I look, and just like accepting, just the concept of accepting oneself is, I feel like a lot of people struggle with that too, and that it might be easier for others, but I feel like that's just comes with like wisdom and age, and just definitely realizing, some things maybe you can change, some things may not be able to, but just being happy with where you are and who you are.
Hell yeah, man. Dude, this is a great conversation. I'm loving this. And also, like, cheers again for like you said, it's, accepting yourself fully is a nice, simple, beautiful idea that is also damn hard, because we're like, who wants to accept that they're flawed? Yes. Like, and really look at where they're flawed. I think it helps to remember that everyone's flawed. And right, there's the idea of perfection. Like, as soon as you leave that everything becomes a little bit easier, because you start looking at yourself as like, okay, cool, I'm not perfect, and now what? Like, what can I do? I think it's like a more empowering way to approach things. But I'm curious, like, what do you think made? Because I can't help it, man. I'm a coach. It's like I like asking questions too. But like you said, I struggled with like body image and just maybe disliking some things about yourself. Like, what do you think made the biggest difference for you in like your own journey of getting to where you're at? And like, I'm just going to point it out, like, you're on a podcast talking honestly about like, hey, I used to feel XYZ about myself. And I think that's like a really huge moment to be able to sit here and say that's how you used to feel. 'Cause it's very clear then to me that that's not really how you feel anymore. Or it's integrated, and you balance it with like, hey, I'm able to show up and know how I am. And like we were talking about, but what do you think made the biggest difference for you?
Honestly, the point that made like the biggest difference for me, it's like a couple of different things. Like how you mentioned, like I know myself enough to like be able to balance myself out, like in terms of if I feel like I dislike something about myself, I'll find something positive that I do like about myself just to counteract that. And the major point that really like started changing things for me is my little sister.
Cool.
Where I like, so just to give a little context, like I grew my hair out like multiple times. I used to have braids. I used to do everything, but I always hated how my hair was. Like it was, super curly. I always wanted, the punk look, the spiked up hair and everything, just to be able to dye it. And I never could. I could never get my hair like that because my hair isn't able to get to that point because of the texture and volume and everything. So from constantly like other people telling me, your hair's like super dry, you got to brush it out, do this and that just to get, that straight, long, flowing hair look. I would, put a lot of chemicals in it just to be able to get to that point. But even then, like I was still never happy until I started growing my hair again. And then my little sister started showing me, because she wanted to know more about like hair products, and she started doing her own research. And she started showing me like, hey, your hair is actually, it's who you are. It's something that's never going to change, and you're just damaging it. Like your hair is like beautiful. Like, and she started showing me like a bunch of pictures of other people having the same type of hair and just being very happy with it. And it's something that I was like, okay, let me just embrace it. Let me work on it like the way I should, and, go from there. And from that point on, I would get compliments of random people like, hey, I love your hair. I love the way you do this and that. And I started coloring it and still maintaining it. And it really honestly became part of my identity. Like I love my hair now. Like I love the way it is, the way it looks. And some days I'll have like bad hair days, but from that point on, it was just something like, I'll find certain things that I do like, whether it be just small things. Like I like the way that, like, I smile today, or I like the way my eyes look, or I'll just look in the mirror. I'm like, oh, I'm looking pretty good today. Like, just have that confidence and just be able to walk out. I'm like, okay, nobody can tell me anything. Can't tell me anything negative.
Dude, I love that. The first thing I'm wondering is like, how old was your sister when she started like sharing that with you?
She was honestly like 13.
Yeah,
she was super young, but she was still like very, very like knowledgeable when it came to like knowing people and knowing like oneself.
Yeah, I mean I was gonna say. I mean, the word that comes to me is that wisdom. That like, it's amazing, and this maybe also ties together some other parts of this conversation. But like, you look at. There's a reason why we celebrate kids, and it's because there's a pureness of curiosity and there's they're less beaten down by maybe some of the harder things about life.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's like, but there's also this like innate wisdom, because it's, there's fewer filters maybe. And so like they see the world as the world is a little closer to it without, having built up all of these levels, you know, based on life experiences and, social conditioning and, whatever. Right. But how cool is that? Like a 13-year-old younger sister is like, hey, like your hair is beautiful. Like your hair is part of who you are. And that's a really profound thing to say to your older brother. Like that's,
it was definitely like a one of those moments where at first I was like, shouldn't I be telling you this? But at the same time, it was one of those moments where like it's something that I needed to hear. Even from you know someone as close as my sister, because I've always been told like, you know, oh, your hair is fine, you shouldn't worry about it too much, but it was always from like friends and like outside people, and I felt bad like afterwards for not like listening to them. I've always brushed it off as like, oh, you know, you're just trying to make me feel better, this and that. And it wasn't until like I was at the lowest point and she came to me and said, hey, no, you're fine the way you are. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it took a while just to, you know, process everything and just start to become comfortable with who I am and realize, you know, it's not that bad. It's hair.
Hell yeah, dude. I love that. That's sweet.
Dude, but how about you? Like, was there a point in time in your life where you had like something similar happen or just had like a moment of realization? Like, because based on some of the stuff that you had on your website and Instagram, you mentioned that, you know, you also struggled with body issues as well. Was there a point in time where that you just came to that realization, you know, like I'm comfortable with who I am?
That's a good question. And I think it's interesting because it like really, you know, I think, you know, the very first part of our conversation where I'm like, hey, here's my high level, you know, autobiography, whatever, how I got here. And I think what you just pointed at is the key to my story of like why I'm a coach, why I do what I do now, is because I did overcome some of those things. And you know what? No, I'm gonna correct myself because I overcame them to a point. Because again, like I don't think there's any arriving. I think there's like the constant like gaining of new tools and perspectives and refining old ones, and this constant iterating of ourselves and how we approach the world. But there's no ever arriving at like, cool, now I'm healed, man. Like now I'm set. Now I have overcome this thing. I think if we don't allow ourselves the grace of being a human, if we say that. So, right. So anyway, that's just context for like, yeah, like I was severely bullied. I was very overweight as a kid. I had to change bus routes because of how severe the bullying was. I couldn't play on certain sports teams with kids my own age because I think the parents were concerned I might injure their kids during play, and stuff like that led me to take matters in my own hands. I said, I saw the world as like, well, people don't like me because I am heavy and because I don't, that's the only way I saw it. So I was like, what do I need to do? Get not heavy. And, I went crash course. I was anorexic on and off for like a little over a year. I lost so much weight. My family was so concerned. I didn't let anyone in, didn't talk to anybody about it. And, my family finally stepped in and got me the help I needed to at least level out. And, then I saw like, oh, people are responding to the fact that I'm thin now. like in a good way. Like I got my first girlfriend, you know, and I was like, oh, that's a good thing then. And, you know, it took me a long time to go through all of these ups and downs of learning about myself. And that was really my introduction to like learning how to become okay with myself, not separate from how the world viewed me. But that was like the big first part. And it, you know, sent me into all sorts of the worlds of health and fitness and all this stuff. And I think I'm at a really stable place now. But if I'm honest, I think a big thing that catapulted me into becoming more stable was the second crazy thing that happened in my life that also brought me to like wanting to become a coach. Was I was with my partner for like 11 and a half years. She and I had been married for 2 of those 11 and a half, and seemingly kind of out of nowhere, she's fell in love with this other woman. And so she came out, we split up, and I didn't know who the fuck I was at all. I had no idea. I had no sense of self. Anything I had worked for, I was like, at that time, that was, 30% of my life had been spent with this person. And so more than 35% of my life had been spent with this person, and I didn't know who I was without her. So it catapulted me. It dropped me into the lowest of lows, kind of similar to what we were talking about with like your sister appeared at the right time, offered the right thing when you were like down here. I was definitely down there. And a close friend of mine, Steve, who is an amazing therapist and a coach, gave me some coaching resources. And I was like, wow, this is helping me more than therapy. This is helping me like figure out my direction. And so that's how I kind of got into coaching. And I think that's really, to answer that's a really long way around to answer your question. But like, yeah, for me, it was having to go through all of those really difficult parts of my life in order to gain some experience and start like really working on like the process of letting go of the past experiences and looking at like, who do I want to become now? Like, okay, maybe I don't know who I am today, right? Like I was saying, like I didn't know who I was. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, well, who do I want to be? Like, what kind of person do I want to be? And that was like freeing. And through that, right? Like in the action of acting out who you want to become, you start to know, well, now I'm the person that does this. And so that's present tense. So who am I? How do I become okay with that? It was just like through tiny actions of like acting out, who I wanted to be. And I don't even know if that fully answers the question there, but I think we're close.
It definitely does. It definitely does. Because that actually just brought up a thought that I just had. So speaking of in like terms of like science or scientific stuff, how like energy isn't created, it's like transferred and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that trying to find the best way to word this, that if you surround yourself with that type of like positive and like well-being type of energy, has a strong positive effect on someone that is like in a very low state?
Absolutely. I think the important thing to point out though is it may not be immediate. It may push you further down at first, because there's like, right, also talking about like this science, like we can talk about 2 North Pole magnets are going to repel one another. And I think if you're really low, I think if you're really struggling, it's really important to surround yourself with things that represent the best you could aim for, and bring out the best in you, and only you can determine what the best is. But I do think sometimes it could have an opposite effect where, people, what's interesting is this is bringing to mind some of the music stuff. I think part of a music community that can also be maybe dangerous is, when the ideologies are like, fuck everyone else, or like everything's screwed up. And like when you start to like live in that's hard to escape.
Yeah.
So like-minded surrounding is important, but also like cherry picking certain things. I think maybe the best way I can answer that is like, the short answer is yes. Surrounding yourself with an environment that's going to bring you closer to where you really want to be. Yes. And I think the best way to do it is gradually, like small introductions, right? Like listen to a podcast of like, dude, there are a couple episodes on there, like affirmations and reminding people that they have value and worth, and like they're going to be okay. And like, sometimes something as small as that is like really powerful, and you could just put little bits of that into your life. I think that's the best way to do it. But yeah, I mean, just that just makes me think all about like just energy in general. And I think that, oh man, okay, cool. I'm just going to attach this thing on there too, because I think about this often. You think about the work of, are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Name sounds very familiar.
He's really like interesting neuroscientist, but he talks a lot about, and he's not the first person to really talk this way, but he's a good person to like kind of reference when we talk about like the idea of, the forerunning concepts in quantum mathematics and quantum science now is about like the unified field theory. And right, like unified field theory basically says that everything exists currently, always has, always will, and it's about like attuning the frequency of what you it's about like being where you want to. Getting where you want to go by attuning yourself with the frequency of the thing that you want, basically, right? There's all this other shit around like law of manifestation and all this other stuff that comes with it. But mainly I think what I'm saying is like, even I think it's good for anybody listening, anybody like just in conversation, like even at your lowest, like if you want to subscribe or just play with the idea of like unified field theory, at that exact moment of your lowest, you are entirely capable of being the person you want to be, because it exists right now. You just have to figure out like how to be there. Easier said than done, but it's the process of like aiming towards that frequency that is going to bring you the momentum and whatever else. And that can come in the form of podcasts, books, conversations, music, you name it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's such a great reminder for anybody that feels like they're in a low spot, that it's available.
Okay. That actually just reminded me of the laws of attraction. Mm-hmm. I remember, I forgot who specifically it was, but they were talking about using the law of attraction to like be able to better like yourself. Because, and going into the unified field theory that you mentioned, because the person that you want to be does exist, you just got to tune yourself to that frequency. Once you work on yourself to become that person that you want to be, then everything that you've wanted, not in terms of, well, everything that you felt like you wanted in terms of like relationships or like wanting like good people around you, that will come naturally, because other people would want to surround themselves, like be around you, because of that energy that you put off.
Yeah.
So, and I took that into heart, because I've always like going into like, you know, comics and video games and stuff, like I've always wanted to be like the hero, but I've, you know, the main character of like a story or whatever, but it wasn't until like throughout life that I realized, you know, I was kind of like the side character that had to work like 10 times harder just to be able to keep up with like the main character who was talented. And it made me realize, you know, this is like the type of person I want to be. I want to be able to help people. I want to do something creative, but I know I'm not there just yet. So the more that I work on myself to get to that point, then I'll know that like throughout that entire journey, I'll probably be able to help like one or two people. And heck, I just reminded myself, like, one of the more inspirational people in my life was my 8th grade science teacher.
Nice.
And I can't speak today. I specifically remember the very first day of class, because he was also, he lived in New York. I think it was in Queens. And he wrote a poem for the class. Basically, the whole premise of the poem was that everything he does for us. And that if his goal throughout the year is if he can reach one person, or, you know, touch one person and change their life for the better, then he knows he's done his job as a teacher. And he said like he would love to be able to reach all of us, but he understands that, you know, we're young, we're rebellious, and we're gonna have our own thing. But if he can just reach one person, then he knows he's done his job. And that's resonated with me like throughout life, because if I know that I can help at least one person, then I feel like I've done good on earth. That I'll be happy with myself that I've been able to help somebody out.
Cheers to that, man. That's awesome. I mean, my first thought is, sounds like that teacher did his job. he you know, an 8th grade science teacher has something that still swims in your head years later. That sounds like he succeeded at what his aim was. And I think, respectfully, I would love to challenge part of what you're talking about, because I think it'll be even more helpful. Is that, like, it's not about getting anywhere. I don't think it's about acting on the path that you know, that destination requires. Like, that is the success. And I think the more everybody can look at their lives that way, you know, the less stress there's going to be, the less overwhelm, less comparison, less, you know, all this shit that holds us back from really doing stuff we want to do. It's like, right. So if you want to, like, if the goal of the podcast is to, like, maybe help one person, right? And you just show up to the podcast with that intention, you're succeeding. That's it. It doesn't matter if you ever hear from one person that goes like, dude, you saved my life. It doesn't matter, because that your 8th grade teacher doesn't know that he did this for you. You know, maybe now he will, if he listens to the podcast. Hopefully. But I don't know. I just think that's such a good way. It's a helpful way to think about how we show up in our lives. Like, you can have, like, set this like sick vision goal for yourself. Like, where do you want to go? And, like, what do you really want to do? Great. Now, just remember that every single action you take, like, think about, all right, you know, this future version of me, what would they do? How would they act? How would they show up today? And the more you can do that, like, and recognize that every time you act, think, do, behave in accordance with what that path would look like, dude, you're there. Like, because there is no arriving. It's just being there is like just being in the action of in the walking the direction of that. Anyway, I don't know. That's my thought. And
I definitely, you know, I understand what you're trying to say, and I agree 100%, because it, you know, even throughout life is just enjoying the journey, because we already know how life is going to, you know, play out. Like, we already know, like, the ending and the destination is just got to make the most of, like, the in between. And that's
definitely,
I try my best not to take life so serious, but I know there's, everybody has their days, and that's really why I just take it like one day at a time. Like, I started doing things on a whim. Like this podcast, it started off with just me and two of my friends, and decided to pick back up. Got into photography just on a whim on a Black Friday. Saw a camera for sale, and I was like, I want to do that now.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Just keep chasing the things like that. That's how you continue to, like you were saying before, you continue to learn more about yourself when you allow yourself to go like, oh, I want to mess with that. I want to mess with that. There's something in you calling out for that,
Yeah, definitely, man.
That's sick.
So I think we're going to wrap this up here. Dude, I really love this conversation. If you ever want to come back, I definitely want to have you back on the podcast.
Awesome, man.
So talk some more. Dude, you're really a great person, and just like everything you've accomplished, I can already tell like the energy you have is phenomenal.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I had a great time. I love just, this is, the stuff that lights me up the most is like being able to have like real conversation and connect with people. That's it. And this checked those boxes, man. It was really nice getting to know you and talk about all sorts of stuff. And I look forward to hopefully coming back on at some point. I would love that.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Well, I hope you have a great day, great weekend, and stay safe out there.
Thank you very much, man. You too. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Take care.
All right, buddy.